Inside Story Uganda, real source of political updates.
It will confirm allegations. But to go on with Chibuka Bachitwari. Let intelligence himself in every war to win political intelligence. And they fear to write. Into Your Excellency, if the banks grab assets of these people, it has a political bearing. These people say that there is a plot to grab Uganda buildings in Kampala. What do we do? A person has small political economy. And the president would give Yiso and the ESO directors, chiefs, opportunities to talk to him alone. What do we better use a kuogera? Yagamba kaka ntifuluma yagamba Museveni sinza kuogera nga kaka mwali kaka nali ndebwe ola kaka yanyiga nnyo ekazi nali kwatanda natisima lyamwembarasinga kaka yayingira nalyo director wa
oyo bagamba bamufunyisa olubuto
ababukedde bawandiika ali under house arrest kati obana buuka kaka nyime babukedde bampayira buli kimu
wali umufunyisa ali mu house arrest
era bamukubira esimu mubuuza nti wayiwoza aladdi
gw'omukubira ne ku simu
byabukedde
ngano bagamba nti gw'omukubira n'omubuuza
byabukedde
gwe tomanyi mukazi lwaza
nali mumanyi
ati kyegamba gw'oliza
naye ababukedde bo balina layini yange balina gundi byabwe bizibu naye kyegamba nti a setback, if we take advantage of a setback, these people are denying just drugs. Drugs are becoming political.
That's what your president Yagama. Yalabamu ekirungi. Alabyemu ekirungi. Kyogamba.
Yes.
Nti ekirungi mu kibi.
Twekolere eryaffe.
Ayina kyalabamu. Nti omuzungu akiyita blessing in disguise.
Yes, kati look what South Africa. South Africa bagiteekako boycott. Neyekolera ebintu byayo. South Africa is anamuzisera ezo gundi zenyenyi ziraba drones eyo project bali bagita levy project South Africa yali egikola ne Israel enyenyi sali mu bantu. Why South Africa had anamuzembago it had to produce on its own. That's why for me I've survived because sinza kukiza kunjoga sijagenda mu government kola sirijiddamu tuli entula ntuli aki ne siribaddamu kunjoga ate Katonda nyambi nti twakubanga wano obutambi abantu kabaga tebuliyo ayawe nti omusango oguvunanibwa ba dokita nkaaga mu basatu mulimu ne minister 8 gutandika ku Lwakubiri babagala Hague babatwale Hague
tubuulirako wo
itugenda kuwulira babadde batunda amawoowolo ne badda mu bantu ne babatemyemu ebitundu bibiri abatwala abaana ebweru because it is reported 4,000 girls, Ugandan girls, were killed in India alone and their organs were extracted. Kakati baba bali abasajja bayisisi baga ino gana amakampuni akatwalanga abantu ebweru tetuyinza gapininga ddabu tetumanyi gote kamanyi byakolebwa ngeri etasasoma naye bano abattanga abantu mu Uganda ate babikujjamu oli mulamu kyobula munzi mwali mpadde ne sente singa mumpeeza ne sente. Do you see accidents? Many accidents? Mukimanyi nti ebyo byafika salamu okutta abantu emasaka ku luguudo byali deliberate nge emasaka eriyo tipo ekulamu
naye gwe tukyawulira accident
ziriwa basi zetumeranga mu Eastern Uganda zikyaliyo accident mu bikajjo bya Meta center yali Kiruddu nga center eri Lugazi under the hospital.
Okwagala okusoma ku butabo buno obwa Tamale Mirundi kubanga bwina engeri gye tukwanaganyaamu n'ebyo bye tuba twogeddeko. Era ku mulundi guno akatabo kenkutte wano mu ngalo munanga awuliriza yakateekako omutwe ogugamba nti who to blame, ekitegeeza tunenyaani. Is it the market master or the madman? Nti omulalu gwe tuba tunenya oba ssentala w'akatale. Era bwe tugenda wano ku mutwe ogugamba nti how he survives where others failed, kiri ku muko gwa kusatu bw'obanga okayina osobola okugoberera era nga tutandise bwe tuti webale kubeera nti oli wamu naffe. Dr. Besigye has taken full advantage of the following circumstances. 1. The emergence of a stealing group in government. Besigye emerged after the 1996 elections. The polls portrayed that the NRM government was not as strong as earlier anticipated. The challenge posed by Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogerere as a presidential candidate had sent shivers down the spines of the emerging stealing group, in brackets Akakundi. But the Kakundi overlooked the following factors. Number 1, NRM did not undermine or destroy the old order completely. In Ghana, for example, when Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings took over power, the new leadership overhauled the entire old system, rounding up all former leaders and thieves to be executed. In Uganda, Museveni initiated an all-embracing government inclusive of members of old regime. He also accommodated former members of the fighting groups like UFM, FEDEMU and UNLA. These ones still harbored hostility against the government. Number 2, at its assumption of power, the NRM faced a number of counter-insurgency groups sponsored by neighboring countries that feared the NRM revolution to engulf them. In Kenya, for example, the Moi regime was facing several rebel groups such as Kenya. In order to deny his political opponents the opportunity to regroup and form a new political party, President Moi in 1983 declared Kenya a single-party state. In other words, Kenya was also facing very similar challenges the NRM was accusing Obote of. This explains our earlier frosty relations with Nairobi. On many occasions, war drums sounded on both sides of the border. However, this is history today. Kenya used the clumsy excuses to close the border with Uganda, knowing very well the economic impact it would cause to Kampala. Denying Uganda access to basic commodities would trigger an uprising. The scenario that the NRM revolution could spark off a related rebellion in Kenya had forced President Daniel Arap Moi to chair the botched peace talks between the Okello's junta and NRM. The talks generated into peace jokes, and the NRM stormed Kampala to take over power. In Sudan, the Khartoum government was also aware that the SPLA stood to gain from the changes in Uganda. The new Ugandan government under Yoweri Kaguta Museveni was not hiding its commitment to the total liberation of Africans, including those of South Sudan. In fact, the Obote government had already established the links with the SPLA for the strategic reason to curtail a possible scenario of Khartoum rearming remnants of Amin soldiers who had fled to the southern Sudan to prepare a counterattack for recapturing power. Indeed, some of the arms Bazirio Olarokero used in his push against Obote in 1985 were originally destined to SPLA from the Obote government. Rwanda and Mobutu's Zaire were also sitting on a time bomb. To win friendship with the new administration in Kampala, the late Habyarimana opened up links with the rebel in Luwero. Rwanda became the supplier of essential commodities and also provided the entrance points to the liberated areas under NRM leadership, especially during their interim government under Haji Moses Chigongo in Masaka. Habyarimana was also facing an internal rebellion from the moderate Hutus, who had been isolated from mainstream politics under his single-party system. Many prominent Hutu army officers had been arrested and detained in Ruhengeri, the dreaded prison, in a similar fashion as many Kenyan political dissidents were languishing in Kemiti prison. People like Rizinda Alex Kanyarangwe had been imprisoned but gained their freedom when RPA rebels stormed the prison. Habyarimana's errors. In 1983, realizing that NRA rebels were recruiting Banyarwanda refugees, the UPC government decided to extradite them to Rwanda. The exercise, spearheaded by Dr. Edward Rubaihayo, was conducted in a ruthless manner. Prominent Ugandans of Rwandese stock were targeted. The wife of the then Speaker of Parliament, Mrs. Butagira, was mesmerized to find her name on the list of Banyarwanda for extradition. Retired Anglican Archbishop Sabiti was also targeted. The UPC youth wingers took advantage of the exercise to grab people's bibanja, properties and livestock. Many innocent people were victims. However, the Habyarimana regime did not condemn these actions meted at its citizens in a neighboring country or ask donor nations like France to exert pressure on Obote. And this was a grave miscalculation by Kigali. I think he wrongly believed that Obote's strategy would crush the NRA rebellion in Uganda. Furthermore, Kigali subjected victims of the UPC exercise to a Kinyarwanda language proficiency test before they would be allowed into Rwanda. The purpose was to deny some of them permission to return to their country. Many indeed failed the test, having stayed for too long out of touch with their Kinyarwanda cultural practices. They established a camp at Sofia town near Kagitumba at the Uganda side of the common border. Without a viable alternative, many victims of this exercise enrolled for rebel ranks. In his reaction to criticism, Obote retorted that having accommodated them for over 30 years, was it a crime to politely ask them to return to their country? This encouraged his UPC henchmen to inflict more damage to the alleged Banyarwanda and their properties. Secondly, when the NRM took power, the question of Rwandan refugees cropped up. The opponents of the NRM insisted that non-Ugandans would not be accepted into the army. This attracted attention from the public. It should also be noted that the new government created trouble for these Banyarwanda by entrusting them with big posts and responsibilities in a post-war government after the Luwero War. At one time, Major General Fred Rwigema became Deputy Army Commander and later a minister in the defense portfolio. Dr. Bayingana became the head of medical services. Paul Kagame, head of military intelligence based at Basima. General Kayumba and Bunyenyezi were also active in the northern Uganda against the insurgency. When the NRA introduced military ranks, the ceremony was presided over by Habyarimana himself. He also visited Luwero Triangle, and as a sign of misfortune, his car broke down while coming back to Kampala. Habyarimana donated 3,000 horses to Uganda in the new government's effort to modernize agriculture. Among the high-ranking senior army officers to receive him was none other than Fred Rwigema, who took center stage at Entebbe International Airport. In his speech, Habyarimana compared Rwanda to a glass full of water that cannot accommodate more liquid. He advised the Rwandan refugees in friendly countries like Uganda not to abuse the hospitality of their hosts, because returning to Rwanda was completely out of the options under consideration. Habyarimana rejected the idea of recognizing Rwandan refugees as citizens of Rwanda and issuing them passports as they were demanding. As I pointed out, the Rwandan refugee problem had become a hot issue both in the NRC and the national media. The real intention was to weaken the NRA in its fight against the rebel groups in the northern part of the country. Attempts to form a rebel group in Uganda were also made by remnants of a 1950 outfit called Kirimutu. Translated in good Luganda means that it is only the pregnant woman who knows the responsible man, others first see it. Number 2, old political order. The 1989 elections that expanded the NRSC had helped the members of the old political parties DP and UPC dominate the district elected councils, including Kampala district. This prompted an arrogant attitude from DP leaders that they were capturing NRM. Museveni had also dominated his first cabinet with DP leaders. The first NRM government was dominated by DP politicians. Dr. Semogere, who had earlier joined the Lutwa's government, became Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs. He had served as Lutwa's Minister of Internal Affairs under Paul Mwanga, who in 1980 issued Proclamation number 10 that stopped any other institution, including the Electoral Commission, from announcing the 1980 results. Mwanga usurped the powers of the Electoral Commission, and it was his office which announced the results, not the Electoral Commission mandated under the law. Contravening Mwanga's proclamation would attract a fine of 10 million shillings or 6 months in jail or both. I vividly remember that fearing to face those punitive measures, Munno newspaper where I worked had gone to bed with a DP victory story, but hurriedly burnt all the copies before taking them to the streets. Even outspoken prelate of the Catholic Church, who was among the first registered voters to cast a vote, Cardinal Emmanuel Nsobuga, did not make any comment about the election results. Back to the DP ministers, Museveni appointed, they included Mrs. Victoria Sekitoleko and Robert Kitaliko, both in agriculture, John Sebana Kizito, Gerard Sendaula, Evarist Nyanzi, Ponsiano Mulema, Dr. Semogere's younger brother John Batume Kawanga, Kafumbe Mukasa, and many others. Therefore, it took time for ordinary people to know whether it was a DP government or an NRM government. The NRM strategy was to gain legitimacy and acceptance by using the DP leadership in the short run as it trained its own cadres to establish a stronger political base. Yes, this was achieved, but by 1996, DP structures were still strong. Secondly, the history of DP shows that its official branches are the Catholic Church parishes. This is how Obote failed to undermine it. In 1969, Obote banned DP and declared a single-party dictatorship. However, in 1980, the Bandi party bounced back stronger and more vigorous than when it was officially banned in 1969. In the early 60s, when Mengo tried to undermine DP, the leader of the Catholic Church, Archbishop Joseph Chiwanuka, came out and reduced the battle between him and Kabaka Mutesa II. This explains why the Catholic Church took Kabaka Mutesa II. The 1989 legislative elections were based on the county level. In Buganda, counties used to be big political units. Buganda Kingdom had only 20 big counties. Take, for example, Bukoto County, which was later carved into 6 constituencies. However, in 1989, it was represented by one person. Such a big area required huge financial resources and a well-known personality or one with an organization network like religion or party. Thus, the new political order had revived the Kabaka Yeka sentiments when the NRM government was forced to recognize Kabaka Mutebi as the new king. Since the NRM had no clear position on the future of the abolished Buganda kingdom, it lost the leading role. The Kabaka Yeka remnants took over. They mobilized the people against the government, and the NRM leaders lost the leading role and became reactive to demands. Sensing that the NRM had lost the control, Kabaka Mutebi relied on the Kabaka Yeka remnants to exert pressure on the government to make concessions to Mengo. Mutebi revived the Buganda Lukiko, which took advantage of the poor approach by government on Buganda issues to discredit Museveni that he was breaking a commitment on the Bush agreement about federal. The Gulibo Baganda were incited against Museveni that he was renegading on his war pledge to grant Buganda federal. With their usual intimidating skills, the KY remnants created a big anti-Museveni bloc in Buganda, where he lacked a strong team to counter this YK group. It is therefore not surprising that the Buganda Lukiko, which under the constitution is only a cultural institution with no political and judicial powers, has taken a leading role in all subsequent elections. During 1986 elections, the Lukiko passed a resolution declaring Dr. Semogere as the sole Buganda candidate. Many Mengo ministers were part of Semogere's campaign intrigue. The then Katikiro Joseph Muranya Muli Semogerere declared that a mother goat cleans its newly born with its tongue, meaning that Buganda should vote their own. Catholic priests used the podium to campaign for Dr. Semogerere. The Kabaka Yeka remnants came up with their slogan of Serwaja Okota, referring to Museveni as a foreigner in Buganda. The KY politics rotates around isolation, intimidation, invoke Kabaka's name in Buganda, subnationalism. Every Muganda must support the Biaffe, Buganda's interests, without questioning as who drafted this Biaffe package. Even when they change their position for selfish interests, the Baganda of all status, including professors, must follow suit like a trailer wagon. No questioning, or else you'll be expelled from the clan. Even well-educated religious leaders sacrifice their faith principles for fear of earthly isolation. What amazes me most is that the lowly educated issue out orders the highly educated. Non-elected leaders give directives to elected leaders. They can summon members of parliament at will. Without considering the above factors, some political players from Western Uganda developed fears that Museveni would lose the next 2001 elections. They therefore came out with a strategy to side with Mengo and Northern Uganda elites who were collaborating with Joseph Kony to defeat Museveni in the year 2001 elections, and they created and protected Dr. Besigye since then. This explains partly how he has survived where others failed. Thus, Besigye's survival strategy depends on those two factors: the fear by some elites from Western Uganda to lose their wealthy and the Baganda youth. Kitundu ekyo kisooka omupogo wegukomye kakati
nembaganti Besigye abawesano be bamweza wesanirizi batunya Semugere baga why Semugere abadde mu gavumenti ya Museveni emyaka 9 kintu abadde akiyuyiza tukole strategy Museveni abeere mu buyinza ate nga n'opposition ffe tugifuba tugale olugero manju which Besigye has successfully done is babuweni yamukiro ozamani w'emyaka wesimwene w'egeeta nembaga ekyokubiri nti bw'otunulya hisitolo ye yali mu kiseera ekyo bwemanyi nnyo n'olwali kumpi afaanana mbagambye nti badokita Semugeri bakola ensobi ebajja mu gavumenti ya Obote n'eyamuwanga eyali abapyugu tebajja nabantu abantu basigala balinzidde Museveni banafe ekyejo embaga ekyokubiri nti Museveni yajja n'akola ensobi tebajja na clear position on the Kabaka. Never. He was one of the people who collected the Kabaka from Russia. One for a woman to the Jew. On the way to Mulangira Casabana. Singama Mita Kumikoro. Casabana Mono. The Yasuza Kabaka. Until we have was a citizen of Pila Jivika. The Wangan Simulangi. Fenero to get us one of them. Kabaka Napa, Nagin, one could come. Government had government look very irritating now. Fulan. Our opposition never quatam. Abim Bakamakana Mwanjani up to today. Museveni reacts to the Kabaka. Museveni does control over the Uganda process. He is reactive. Temuja kutikira nebaga tujja kutikira nebatikira. Urishiko sirwa bya bufuze today. Mengo tefugirwa ku mateeka ekyo tekiriyo mengo tefugirwa ku mateeka era abasajja bakugamba tibagezaako okutangira Ssekabaka Muteesa owokubiri ng'akubye omuyigiriza yimike muyigire muwapafu n'amateeka gonna n'agamu kakati today enero njogedde ku Kenya nenjogera ku Congo zibaza ayina ebizibu ne Sudan. Today we have a problem. Musingi I'm bleeding a serious problem. If we don't handle the root of Uhuru fallout, we are likely to suffer as a country. Mujukira nti abajaluwo bakulako leero line ejje Kampala. Training atayitawo. It happened. The battle between Uhuru and Raila should not be extended to our country. We are the losers. Why? Nabaga mu katabo ke nawandiika nti Museveni's succession will be bloody. Nabaga nti where you have two rivaling groups, when each calls what they are fighting for a right, the war does not end. Uhuru Kenyatta, after antagonizing his deputy, cannot allow him to take a power. Okiteke deshi. Uhuru Kenyatta tayinza kukkiriza deputy we gwalwanye naye to take a power, which means Uhuru Kenyatta must ensure nti utatakwata power. So what does it mean? It means that whoever sides with Ruto becomes a Uhuru opponent. Obuntu obwo bulaba engeri gye bavumamu Uganda ennaku zino Kenya. Me I fear bajja kuba namba loleza ziriko Uganda registered numbers gye tuyise ebintu byaffe, bajja kugana ebintu byaffe okuva mu Mombasa rioters, kubanga ye Kenya luli nkugambye nti Moye yalowooza nti Museveni alese revolution mu region. Mobutu president olwamala okulayira agenda wa Mobutu, Otafire yagenda wa Habyarimana. Nimba buli statement Kabaka gye yakoze Habyarimana yagikola. Don't abuse the hospitality of host nations. Hospitality means you wouldn't have got it. You are foreigners. When the Kabaka says don't abuse the hospitality, this is a very strong statement, and he will not withdraw it. Why? If the president wanted to talk, he would have talked to the Kabaka earlier. Abaganda baga nti Gambobbi wamwenga alisangawo. It just gives you the courage. But otherwise, that's his feelings. He knows. He grew up in Europe. He knows the selection of words. If Kenya, put the fight at your enemy's door, we may end up with riots in Kampala if the battle between Uhuru and Ruto extends to Uganda. Do you know why? Do you remember? Whether he had not invited Museveni, they had invited Raila Odinga. Do you remember it? That Museveni had to strike a deal at night. How had they contacted Raila Odinga without the government knowledge? Have you forgotten that recently, when the Kabaka went for treatment, he paid a courtesy call to Uhuru Kenyatta? Have you forgotten? If somebody wants to create political riots in Uganda, whom do you use? Mengo is the most formidable institution. Why? Can Museveni afford to attack Mengo? Can Museveni afford to attack Mengo? So for me, I'm a smaller man. My humble appeal would be, we should not, as Uganda, we should leave their affairs. You see, previously, President in 2007, again the Kenyan banning. They have been coming here. They are choosing Ruto now of coming here. When all of them, how many times has Raila Odinga come? Raila Odinga, bali bagenda omusibe Kenya, nadduka mu komera, bwe yayingira amazzi ga Uganda kuleka Victoria, was escorted by our military, was received by Muhwezi as his boss in Uganda, accommodated, and Museveni registered demands from Moi that he should be deported. Museveni said no. He went to Nordic countries. He almost went to war. Kakati olw'okubabo bategedde nti Ruto is a popular man, a grassroots politician, bamutaddeko kya Uganda. Oba yataddewo n'ekibiina nga kya gundi kya yero n'ekigalo. Obi following Kibaki ye yakola Democratic Party yali mukwano gwa Sebaana yasomera wano Makerere yakola DP ngera tojjukira aba DP bayusi winga bagenda munoonyeza akalulu tobijjukira baddayo oluvanyuma bagamba bafunye government ogenda bafuna eventually Kibaki became a friend of Museveni. Kakati this time round they are muyaba abamonita mutumbategeera bakubye ekifaananyi nga Ruto alina President Museveni nga President Museveni ali mu bya kijaasi kati kyekiri Kenya ayagala kufuga Kenya ayagala kufuga East Africa ayagala kuteeta egundi Uganda's human rights stinks, democracy stinks. What? You see, these ordinary people are usually incited unless we have another route nga tujja kuyisa ebintu bya Dar es Salaam oba ludda bati changing the route is not easy. I'm saying in Kenya war drums being sounded. There are sounds of war drums. And these peasants went because we had the experience of uprooting the railway that affected the transport of goods through Luoland. And the president yabaganti abalu abo bolengo wali omusajja bamita Fred Olengo. Ate kale ekikwewunyisa nti politics ekyo Museveni paid a visit to Odinga's father's place n'alambula ne muleziyamu ye n'akola. But Odinga alinga Besigye, you are good as long as you are supporting him. As long as you are not supporting him, then you are an enemy of Kenya. So I believe nti akatabo kangako kakulaga atmosphere yaliwo, it is becoming clearer. Okasomye bulungi n'okategeera tebijula kufaanagana situation nene yalo tujula kufaanagana neno gye tugendamu. Yes.